Yo, what's up, squad? We back at it with another video. We got this Mr. Ballen. I've been liking how my channel going. I've been liking y'all supporting. Y'all been liking. Y'all been just showing me love, and I appreciate everybody that's doing that. Like I said, we're gonna get 1,000 eventually. Let's just keep dropping that like. Let's just keep getting pushed in the YouTube algorithm. So, yeah, that's all I got to say. I ain't finna hold up y'all time. I know y'all busy. I'm busy. And when I say I'm busy, I mean just uploading these videos. So. And going outside praying. So, yeah.
Zona, when they started to hear this loud rumbling sound, so curious, they unzipped their tent and they looked in the direction the sound was coming from, and it was coming from this dirt road, kind of straight up ahead of them. And at first, all they could see was this huge dirt and dust cloud kind of barreling towards them. And then in the middle of this cloud, suddenly something appeared that both of these campers knew should not have been in this forest. And so seconds later, this thing blew past them and disappeared into the trees in the other direction. And for a moment, the two campers had no idea what to do. They began to kind of rationalize why this thing was here, but before they got very deep into that conversation, they began hearing the rumbling sound again. And they looked, and sure enough, the big thing was coming back. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please replace the like button's maple syrup with brake fluid. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss... Okay? On the night of May 27, 1995, a long-haul truck driver named Devin Williams pulled his gigantic refrigerated semi-truck into a truck stop in a city called Kingman, Arizona. After putting his truck in park, Devin reached over and grabbed his sleeping bag off the passenger seat and began to unroll it. Devin would normally get out and use the bathroom and brush his teeth before going to sleep for the night. But this night, Devin was so exhausted that instead of going in, he just unfurled that sleeping bag and then climbed behind the front two seats of his truck and got into what's called the sleeper cab, which is an area behind the front two seats in the cab where drivers can lay down and rest. Devin had been on the road for the last 4 days, basically non-stop, and all he wanted to do was just finish the stupid route and get back home to his wife, Mary Lou, and their 3 kids in the tiny town of Americus in Kansas. Devin hated being away from his family for long periods of time, which unfortunately was part of his job, being a long-haul truck driver. But they needed the money because he and his wife had just bought a new house, and it was a total fixer-upper, and so they needed to do a whole bunch of repairs to turn that house into a home.
Yep, that's
So,
understandable.
missing his family and just wishing he was done with this route, Devin laid in his sleeping bag in the sleeper cab trying to fall asleep, but he just couldn't. And unfortunately, as Devin knew, if he didn't sleep this night, then he would have to take another break later on this route to rest, because he couldn't just continue to drive with absolutely no sleep. And so taking an additional break that he was not prepping for could affect his ability to get home on time. It was Saturday night, and the strawberries and lettuce that Devin was hauling inside of his truck were due in Kansas City, Missouri, 1,300 miles away, on Monday morning. So Devin began doing the math in his head. If he stopped a little while later to take another sleep break, would he still be able to cover those 1,300 miles by Monday? And he just wasn't sure. Everybody at the trucking company where Devin worked knew the 29-year-old as being very easygoing and good-natured. Trucking was very hard. People drove insanely long hours on very little sleep, and some people even took drugs to stay awake even longer to make sure they hit their deadlines. And so truckers have kind of earned the reputation of being very rough and tough people. And Devin certainly looked rough and tough. He was this big guy who wore cowboy hats, he had a big Fu Manchu mustache, he had tattoos. But in reality, despite how he looked, he was actually like a gentle giant, and really all he talked about were his kids, who he was totally devoted to. The only time anyone at this company saw Devin get mad was when his work interfered with his ability to see his family. And now, as Devin tossed and turned inside of his sleeper cab, he was getting mad because he was thinking this stupid route and his inability to sleep during this particular break was very likely going to interfere with seeing his family. And after an hour of Devin getting angrier and so not sleeping at all, he finally just gave up on sleep. He chucked his sleeping bag, he climbed out of the cab, and he headed into the truck stop, where he went to the bathroom, he got a bite to eat, and then he called his boss, and he told him that he had just made a stop in order to sleep, but he couldn't, and so he was just going to hit the road again. But don't worry, even though I need another break in order to sleep, I will be in Kansas City on Monday morning with this delivery on time. After speaking to his boss, Devin left the truck stop, climbed back into his truck, he fired it up, and then before long, he was back on the highway driving east. Devin's boss was a guy named Tom Wilson, and he didn't find anything unusual about this phone call he got from Devin. Maybe it was a little unusual that Devin was unable to sleep, and that he called his boss to say he was unable to sleep, but Devin sounded totally normal. And so that night, Tom was not worried at all that Devin would not make it to Kansas City by Monday morning. Devin was like one of his most reliable guys, and so if Devin said he was going to be there on Monday morning, even if he needed extra breaks along the way, then he would be there on Monday morning. But on Monday morning, the distribution center in Kansas City, Missouri, where Devin was supposed to go and drop off the lettuce and strawberries, called Tom Wilson, and they said, "Hey, your driver's not here yet. What's going on?" Now, at first, Tom was actually really annoyed with the distribution center because he felt like, okay, the clock has just struck the deadline. Devin will likely arrive in the next few minutes, and they're prematurely calling to complain. And so Tom communicated that to the distribution center, and they said, okay, fine, we'll wait a little bit longer. But when almost an hour passed and still Devin had not shown up, the distribution center called Tom back and said, hey, he's not here. Now, after the second call, Tom totally changed his mindset, and he was actually now worried about Devin. And so he apologized to the distribution center and said he would get in touch with Devin as soon as he could and figure out where their shipment was. But Tom couldn't just call Devin and ask where he was and what was going on, because this was back in 1995. They didn't have cell phones, and so Tom basically just had to wait for Devin, who's out on the road somewhere, to stop somewhere and call Tom to tell Tom what's going on. And so all day Monday, Tom sat at his desk waiting for a call from Devin. And when he didn't get a call from Devin, Tom began calling his other drivers all over the country, asking them if maybe they had had some sort of interaction with Devin and knew where he was and why he had not made it to Kansas City on time. But none of the drivers had any idea what was going on with Devin. No one had spoken to him. Then, that evening, Tom got a call, but it was not from Devin. It was from Devin's wife, Mary Lou. And she was calling
She
to
looking
say,
for him, too.
"Where's Devin? He was supposed to be home by now, and he's not. I haven't heard from him in days. What's going on?" And at this, Tom suddenly thought, okay, we have a real problem here. And so when Tom explained to Mary Lou what was going on with Devin, how he had missed his deadline, Mary Lou panicked and immediately called the police. A little while later, a police officer in Americus, Kansas, arrived at Mary Lou's house to take down the missing person report. And after they did that, the deputy assured Mary Lou that very likely her husband would be found and he would be just fine. And so they explained to Mary Lou that what they would do is put out an alert to all the different police departments that fell kind of roughly along the route that Devin's truck had been on, and see if any of them had had some sort of interaction with Devin. You know, maybe he got into an accident, maybe his truck broke down and he was stranded somewhere, you know, maybe he was hospitalized, who knows? But very likely one of these police departments would know where Devin was. And sure enough, after this alert went out, the officer got a call back very quickly from a sheriff's department in a place called Coconino County, Arizona. Coconino County was located 200 miles to the east of Kingman, Arizona, which was where Devin had been on Saturday night, but couldn't sleep, and then called his boss to say he was going to hit the road again. But, interestingly, the sheriff's department in Coconino County made it very clear to the police officer in Americus, Kansas, that they had no idea where Devin was, but they definitely knew where his truck was. In fact, basically everybody in Coconino County knew where Devin's truck was. It was all anybody in that county was talking about. Because on Sunday,
So this happened before the day.
Devin was reported missing.
This happened before that
Somebody
day.
driving
Where they
Devin's
had
truck
called to
spent
make a
the
police
entire
report.
day terrorizing hikers and campers inside of the Tonto National Forest in Coconino County. The Tonto National Forest, which is 600,000 acres of just rugged wilderness preserve, was nowhere near Devon's trucking route. In fact, it wasn't near any trucking route ever. It's like 20 miles off of the highway, and the roads in the forest are barely wide enough to support small cars going through, let alone a 48-foot long, massive 10-ton semi-truck like Devon was driving. But on Sunday morning, so roughly 8 hours after Devon had called his boss Tom, two hikers named Lynn and Jack Yarrington were in their tent inside of Tonto National Forest, just having a nice time. It's peaceful, it's quiet, and they're right near this dirt road that kind of bent around a corner. And suddenly, they began to hear a rumbling sound coming from one end of this road. And so they were in their tent, they unzipped it, they looked out, and at first, all they saw on the road coming in their direction was this huge cloud of dust and smoke. And then through the dust and smoke came Devon's humongous truck blazing down this road at practically full speed. And at first, Jack and Lynn are like, how is this truck even in the forest? How did it get here? How did it actually manage to drive to this point? And after Devon's truck whizzed past them and blazed off in the other direction out of sight, Lynn and Jack weren't scared or worried. They were just totally confused. And so they began speculating, like, well, maybe the driver got lost and they're trying to find a place to turn around or something. And sure enough, a couple of minutes later, they heard a rumbling sound and they saw another cloud of dust, and it was Devon's truck now coming back in the other direction on this same dirt road.
Yeah, he taunted
so Jack and Lynn, they kind of backed up behind their tent, and they watched as this truck blazed past them again, flying out the other direction. And so in some ways, that kind of confirmed to Lynn and Jack that yes, this driver, who's definitely driving recklessly at this point, has likely gotten lost, they've managed to turn around, and now they're heading back out to the highway, and that's all this was. And then all of a sudden, as they're kind of chatting about it and laughing about it, they hear the sound of the truck coming back again. And they look up, and sure enough, there's Devon's truck barreling down the road again. Except this time, Jack and Lynn, they looked where Devon's truck was going, and they saw there was a small sedan coming up the road in the opposite direction. So Devon and the sedan are going to collide, and because this road was actually on a turn, the driver of the sedan couldn't actually see the truck, and the driver of the truck, whether it was Devon or somebody else, couldn't see the sedan. And so both drivers are driving towards each other without realizing it. And so Jack and Lynn, they jump up, they begin screaming and yelling at the driver of the truck to slow down, but the truck didn't slow down. It just continued coming down the road, and the sedan driver, he saw Jack and Lynn flailing their arms and trying to get somebody to stop on the road, and so sensing there was another car, the sedan came to a full stop, and then right in front of them, they saw this truck come barreling around the road, and so the sedan began backing up wildly, trying to get out of the way of this huge truck, and then finally, the driver of the sedan just cut the wheel and peeled off the side of the road into the brush, and right as they did, the truck, which had not slowed down at all, even though the driver could have clearly seen the sedan, just whizzed right past the sedan and would have smashed into it if the sedan had not jumped off the road. The driver of the sedan got out of the car, and when Jack and Lynn ran up to him to make sure he was okay, he would tell them that he got a good look at the driver of the truck as he drove past him, and he told them that the driver was just gripping the wheel, looking totally straight ahead, no expression whatsoever,
I think dude was on
barreling
drugs or
past
something.
him. It was like he didn't even look at the sedan. He was just going. A little later that day, and not far from where this incident had just happened on this road with Jack and Lynn and the sedan, there was this family that was hiking through Tonto National Forest, and they had arrived at this big, beautiful open field in the middle of the forest, and they planned to have a picnic in this field. But as they came out of the tree line and walked into this beautiful, open, high grass meadow area, they looked out and they saw, just kind of in the middle of the field, was this huge truck that made no sense. How in the world could this truck have gotten to this meadow? They didn't know. But they clearly saw there's a truck, and the father of the family, he saw there was a man standing next to this truck, just kind of looking away from them, off at the mountains in the distance. And so this family kind of assumed that the driver of this truck had somehow gotten into this meadow, and maybe their truck was stuck, and so now they need help. And so the father told his family to stay put for a second, and then he, on his own, walked across the meadow towards this truck, And as the father got closer, he did see that very clearly the truck was stuck in the mud. And so this driver very likely is stranded. And so as he got close enough, the father yelled out to this guy and said, "Hey, do you need some help? We can go back and call someone. What can we do for you?" But the man who was standing outside of the truck didn't even turn around to talk to this father. He just kept standing.
See, and that's one thing about it. I would never go to somebody if he haven't turned around and acknowledged me, and I'm asking him, do he need some help? Just leave him alone. All you gotta do is walk back, grab your family, because you don't know what that dude got on him or what he's capable of doing. Just go back, go call the police and tell them that it's somebody sitting outside by their truck. It looked like it got stuck in the mud. And I don't know, he acting bizarre. He acting strange and weird. I swear, you will understand if you...
Standing there motionless.
You will understand if you seen people like that. You could tell, you literally, this is what I say all the time. You could literally go outside your house right now and go see somebody. Hold a little bit, no, don't even hold a little bit of conversation. You could say hey to that person. You could tell off rip just by looking in his eyes that it's something off about him. Or her. It don't always have to be a dude, but it could be a dude. It could be a female too. You could tell if it's something off. I could just pick that up automatically.
Off into the distance. And so the father made it about 5 or 6 feet away from this guy. And the father just stopped and very clearly said, "Hey, I'm talking to you. Do you need help?" And at this point, the man who was standing next to the truck, he turned around and he looked at the father. And immediately the father kind of backed up for a second because there was something off about this guy. The guy was just kind of standing there and he was staring at the father, and he opened his mouth like he was about to speak. But instead of speaking, he just kept opening his mouth wider and wider until it was as wide as he could get it. And then he began wiggling his lower jaw back and forth as fast as he could.
I think dude was on a lot of drugs. Because remember when he said he couldn't sleep because he was thinking about his family. He just wanted to hurry up and do his job and bring them lettuce and strawberries. So, I mean, I guess he took a lot of drugs just to go hurry up and deliver it, and he lost his mind. Or it could have been... I don't like bringing up the whole mental shit, but I don't know what it could be. Probably was just on drugs, and his brain got fried.
Simultaneously. And so the father just began backing up like there was something wrong with this guy. And right as the father was about to just turn around and leave and go protect his family from this guy, the guy stopped with his mouth, and then he just stared directly at the father and said very calmly, "I didn't do it. They did it." Now, when the father heard this, he was already so weirded out by this guy that he didn't even have any questions to follow up with. Instead, he just turned and began running back towards his family. And so feeling very unsettled, the family, they ran back to their car, they drove back home, and they called the police about this guy and his truck. It would take a deputy from the Coconino County Sheriff's Department a little while to finally navigate their way all the way out to this meadow where this truck and this guy apparently were. And when the deputy got there, they walked out into this meadow, and sure enough, just like the father had said, there was the truck stuck in the mud. And so the deputy began walking out to the truck, expecting to see the driver, this guy who the father had said was acting totally weird. But when the deputy got up there, he found the truck was totally abandoned. There was nobody in the cab, there was nobody nearby, it was just sitting here, but it was still running. And so the deputy tried to open up the cab, but it was locked. He did look inside, and everything looked very neat and orderly. And then he went around to the back of the truck, and he opened up the back doors, and he found the refrigeration unit was still on, and inside of this truck was lots and lots of strawberries and lettuce. So the deputy really didn't know what to make of this truck in the middle of the field, combined with this report that the father gave about this guy who was standing near it, acting totally weird. And so he just checked the license plate of the truck and he ran it against his database to see if there were any matching reports of missing trucks or missing truck drivers, but there weren't any. Because remember, this is on Sunday this is happening, and it wasn't until the next day, Monday, that Devin was reported missing and his truck was added to a list of missing trucks and missing truck drivers. And so the Coconino County deputy just called a towing company who came out and hauled Devin's truck out of the forest. And then 24 hours later, when Devin was reported missing, the Coconino County Sheriff's Department put it all together and contacted the officer in Americus, Kansas to say, okay, we do have Devin's truck, but we don't have any other answers for you. The behavior of the man who was driving Devon's truck through Tonto National Forest was so insanely out of character for someone like Devon that it seemed totally impossible that Devon could have done this. But both Lynn and Jack Yarrington and the other people who saw this truck flying through the forest on that Sunday, they all insisted that the man they saw in the cab driving this truck matched the picture of Devon Williams. But there was absolutely no reason
that is
why
bizarre.
Devon would want to go to the Tonto National Forest. And even if he did want to go to this forest
because
for
that
some
was so
reason,
off-road.
he should have known that his massive semi-trailer truck was not a good choice to be driving around these narrow dirt roads in the middle of this wilderness preserve. All we know about Devon is that at the time he went missing, all he likely wanted to do was just get home to America's Kansas to be with his wife and 3 kids again. That's really all he cared about. The police did consider that, maybe Devon just ran away. But that theory didn't add up.
Yeah,
Devon had no criminal
sense.
record. He had a great relationship with his wife, so there were no issues there. And there were no other kind of outstanding relationship issues with friends or family. And financially, even though it was a little tight, they were doing just fine. They just wanted some extra money to fix up this house and make it really nice. It wasn't like they were struggling to put food on the table. Also, the police considered that, maybe Devon was kidnapped or something. But Devon is like this big, imposing, tattooed, cowboy hat, big mustache, tough truck driver. I mean, who's going to try to kidnap that guy? Devon also had no medical issues. He wasn't struggling with his mental health. He had no neurological abnormalities. He also never used drugs and always passed every single drug test that he got while working for this trucking company. Devon was basically just this totally normal